September 1975. Two con men swindle millions of pounds and vanish without a trace. The case is going cold until psychic Bob Cracknell has a vision.
They're living in a cave. And they said, where? I said, Scotland.
No one believes him. The police think he's a crank.
You deal in facts and that's it.
But time is running out. Can the psychic find the con men before their innocent victims lose everything? The strange story of the two preachers who conned millions of pounds begins back in the 1960s, when two respected middle-aged businessmen open a nursing home in the south of England. Jim Miller and John Bellard have been together since university. They are intellectuals, interested in theology. They're also lay preachers, with friends high up in the Anglican Church. Miller is also a holistic therapist. He's clever, charismatic, a natural leader. Bellard is quieter, more reflective. He is the home's bookkeeper. The two men become local benefactors. They help the poor and give to charity. They are well liked in the local community. With the success of the home, Miller and Bellard begin to expand their business interests. They set up a company selling musical instruments and indulge their taste for fast cars by sponsoring racing events. The two men are now living the high life and enjoying every minute of it. Then, in September 1975, the mirror cracks. Miller and Bellard fail to turn up with the prize money at a race they've sponsored. The outcry reaches the ears of Norman Luck, crime reporter with Britain's Daily Express newspaper.
We had a telephone call from a number of people involved in motor racing at Brands Hatch. And they were a bit upset because their sponsor had vanished.
As soon as Luck begins to sniff around, he discovers that the missing sponsorship money is only the tip of a multi-million-pound fraud. Detective Constable David Fickweiler of the Sussex Fraud Squad is already on the case.
They had entered into thousands of finance agreements with various finance companies. The transactions allegedly were for the sale of organs to churches.
In the early 1970s, an electric organ can cost up to £5,000. Churches don't have that kind of money. And finance companies will only lend to individuals. So the charismatic Jim Miller persuades his friends and employees to do a good deed for a church by signing for a loan on their behalf. The church will then repay the loan from their organ fund. Jeff Green was one of the employees who signed for a loan.
You feel that you're in a small selective group that are just helping a few churches out. So on the face of it, that seemed okay.
Except that the churches are completely unaware of their involvement in the scheme. With a signed agreement, Miller and Bellard collect the money for the organ from the finance company, but don't deliver anything to the church.
There were many instances of the same organ being financed several times. So, quite obviously, it was total fraud.
Miller and Bellard end up borrowing over £5 million to pay for organs that are never delivered. When the two men have borrowed up to the limit, the finance companies begin to breathe down their necks, as it is their company supplying the organs. Miller and Bellard throw a farewell party and fly off for a holiday in France. 2 days later, a postcard is delivered saying they arrived safely. That is the last anyone hears of them. Shortly afterwards, Miller and Bellard's friends and employees suddenly find they are about to lose everything they possess if they don't repay the millions they have signed for. The con men have vanished, and the police have no idea where they are. So journalist Norman Luck and Detective Fickweiler decide to pool their resources to try to find them. But after a month, neither have made any progress. Then, one evening, a friend of Luck's suggests he might use the help of a psychic. Psychic Bob Cracknell is keen to use his abilities to help fight the crime.
I think Norman was extremely cynical at the time, you know. He was a hard-bitten journalist.
Bob meets Norman Luck at his home. The journalist shows him some photographs. Bob then surprises the journalist with accurate descriptions of the con men.
Now, this guy, he's the weak one of the two. He's got a gammy leg. And Norman said, how can you tell that from a photograph?
I was sceptical, of course I was. But there was nowhere else he could have got the information from. If he'd done some research on the situation beforehand, then possibly he would have known.
Then Bob's psychic abilities astound the skeptical journalist. He senses a powerful figure at the heart of the scandal, someone high up in the church who is being blackmailed.
I hadn't been told anything about the case, and I said, now there's a bishop involved. Form of blackmail of some description. It's a big fraud, but it's blackmail.
I was rather amazed because I didn't know how the hell he could have known that. That hadn't been released by the police, and it certainly hadn't been released by me.
Luck has been told confidentially by the police of an embarrassing story at the heart of the crime. Miller and Bellard were close friends with an Anglican bishop who was having extramarital affairs.
Miller and Bellard were allowing this senior church person to use a chalet in the grounds for his various dalliances.
So, this is where it all
happened. And this obviously was the secret behind the whole lot.
Yes?
The reason they started the fraudulent transactions was to raise money to pay off what they said were a number of ladies of the night who were threatening to expose their relationship with a former bishop of Guildford.
But then the bishop died before repaying the money, leaving Miller and Bellard with a large debt. Could this have been the motive which led two men of impeccable character and no previous record into a life of deception and fraud? Staff at the home give Bob some articles of the men's clothing to see if he can sense their whereabouts.
From the moment I began to touch the items, I was convinced that there was somebody close by who knew where they were. And I said, no, they're not in France. They're here. They've come back.
Right from the start, Bob had this feeling that they hadn't come back to the UK. I don't think I believed it.
And I think that was when Norman got his second shock, when I said, they're here. And they said, where? I said, Scotland, Ullapool.
Ullapool is a fishing village on the west coast of Scotland. Where could the fugitive con men hide out in such a small place?
The whole thing that was getting me throughout was the church. And I'm not talking about the church organs. The connection is with the church. I know it.
Miller and Bellard had always had a religious leaning. Apparently, they had often discussed becoming monks and joining a monastery.
That was possibly the church connection I was looking at. They were in some monastery. They were in some religious retreat.
But there is no monastery in or near Ullapool. Could he have gotten it all wrong? Detective Fickweiler, meanwhile, ransacks the nursing home searching for the money, but finds nothing. Could Miller and Bellard have taken it with them? The police interview everyone close to the con men. Of particular interest to them is Jeff Green, the manager of their racing sponsorships and one of their most trusted employees.
Well, my impression of Jeff Green was that he was one of those people that thought Miller and Bellord were genuine and nice people, real kindly people, and I think he had been, like everybody else, conned by them.
When Luck and Cracknell visit Jeff Green at his home in Brighton, he insists he knows nothing of the two men's whereabouts.
I thought Jeff Green came over as a fair, as genuine character, that he was just another victim of the Miller and Bellord situation.
After talking to Green, I was totally convinced this man was lying. They were in Scotland. He knew, and he was able to contact them. Norman, however, hard-bitten journalist, stated quite simply, "Sorry, without evidence, we cannot pursue it." I was devastated. What could I do? How could I convince anybody?
Bob now faces a serious problem. How can he prove that Jeff Green knows where the two men are hiding? How does a psychic prove what amounts to no more than a feeling? He has only one option: to get the proof himself.